Dr. Amanda Reynolds adjusted her collar as she faced the towering amphitheater of the Galactic Council. Crystalline displays flickered around her, projecting her image to hundreds of alien representatives. The Centaurus chamber had never felt so cold, despite the environmental systems calibrated for dozens of different species. Distinguished members of the council, she began, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. The Sol System Authority must formally object to the Phaleri Dominion's proposed fleet movement through our territory. She paused, letting her words settle in the vast chamber. The Phaleri ambassador, Zextal, shifted his crystalline form in what humans had learned was their equivalent of derisive laughter. His translucent body caught the chamber's light, scattering it in prismatic patterns across the floor. Earth's objection is noted, he said, his universal translator giving his words an artificial smoothness. And dismissed. The upcoming campaign against the Centaurian Alliance requires swift action. Your system lies directly on our path. We will pass through. Amanda pulled up a holographic display of the solar system. Red markers highlighted the region between Mars and Jupiter. The asteroid belt is strictly quarantined for reasons we have documented extensively. Choose another route. A delay of 17 standard cycles is tactically unacceptable, Zextal countered. Your primitive mining operations can be temporarily suspended. This isn't about mining. Amanda's fingers danced across her console, bringing up the official warning beacon frequencies. Every ship that enters our system receives these warnings in 300 languages. The space between Mars and Jupiter is not to be traversed. This isn't a request. It's a warning. The chamber erupted in murmurs. A Centaurian representative, their feathered crest flaring with interest, leaned forward. Dr. Reynolds, your species has been spacefaring for barely 3 centuries. The Phaleri have navigated far more treacherous regions for 15 millennia. Perhaps. Age doesn't equal understanding. Amanda interrupted, breaking diplomatic protocol. We've recorded 27 incidents in that region since 2185. Vessels belonging to 12 different species, all more advanced than humanity. All lost. Zextal's crystalline form pulsed with colors that the human eye couldn't fully process. Lost to what exactly? Amanda kept her expression neutral. Our observations are publicly available. We share everything we can record. As for explanations, she shook her head. The Council knows our policy on speculation. Convenient. Zextal's tone carried the universal sound of contempt. A mysterious threat that only humans can detect, requiring all traffic to take lengthy detours around your system. One might suspect economic motivation. Amanda loaded the final file in her presentation. The chamber's lights dimmed as a new hologram flickered to life. A massive fleet of ships, their design clearly Phaleri, appeared in perfect formation. The 7th Expeditionary Fleet, 2391, she said quietly. 67 ships. They also ignored our warnings. The hologram showed the fleet approaching the asteroid belt. Static interference grew as they penetrated deeper. Then, one by one, the ships began to change. The recording ended abruptly. Propaganda. Zextal dismissed. We have no record of losing a fleet in your system. Of course you don't. Amanda's voice carried a weight of certainty that made several council members shift uncomfortably. None of them live long enough to send warnings. We record. We observe. We warn others. That's all we can do. She gathered her materials, preparing to leave the chamber. Humanity learned through blood and horror what lives in that region of space. We've spent centuries developing technology that appears primitive specifically to avoid its attention. When your fleet enters our system, we will activate our observation posts. We will record what happens. The galaxy must know. As she turned to leave, Zextal's voice rang out. You speak as if the outcome is certain. Amanda paused at the chamber's threshold. 300 ships or 3,000. It makes no difference. The void between Mars and Jupiter doesn't care about numbers. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't show mercy. She looked back one final time. We will record your passing. Perhaps next time, someone will heed the warning." The chamber doors sealed behind her with a soft hiss, leaving the council in uncomfortable silence. In the shadows of the upper tiers, representatives of older species exchanged knowing looks. They had seen that certainty before, in the eyes of those who had learned harsh truths about the galaxy's dark spaces. Major James Sullivan's hands trembled as he reviewed the ancient footage, something that hadn't happened in years. The quantum storage device hummed softly as it projected the events of 2185 onto his office wall. Even after all this time, the recording still carried a classification level that would make most admirals nervous. Computer, begin playback. Ceres event, primary feed. The footage flickered to life, showing a younger James in his cadet uniform, standing beside Dr. Catherine Martinez in the Ceres Research Station's control room. Their excitement was palpable. Humanity's first quantum fold jump within the asteroid belt. The research vessel Odyssey hummed against the starfield, its experimental drives charging for the historic moment. "We were so proud," James whispered to his empty office. "So certain we were ready." The recording captured Dr. Martinez's voice, thick with anticipation. "Quantum fold capacitors at 90%. Odyssey reports all systems nominal." Her younger self turned to Cadet Sullivan with a smile. "In 5 minutes, we'll have changed space travel forever." They had changed it forever, just not in the way they'd hoped. The timestamp clicked forward. Warning lights flashed across the control room's displays. The younger James leaned toward a monitor, his face confused. "Doctor, these readings, the gravitational sensors are showing impossible values." "Impossible is a strong word for scientists, Cadet," Dr. Martins replied, but her voice carried an edge of concern. "Odyssey, please verify your position relative to Ceres." The ship's response came through clearly, Captain Sarah Walsh's voice steady. "Holding at planned coordinates, Doctor. But we're seeing some unusual distortions in our forward sensors. Request permission to delay the fold jump until." The recording crackled with sudden interference. The Odyssey's sleek form seemed to ripple, as if viewed through heavy heat waves. The younger James grabbed his console. "Energy spike. It's not from the ship, it's—" "Cut the drives," Dr. Martinez shouted. "Odyssey, power down immediately. Something's wrong with local space." The next 10 seconds have been analyzed by every major scientific institution in human space. The Odyssey didn't explode. It didn't break apart. Instead, it began to unfold like a piece of origami in reverse, revealing angles that shouldn't exist in 3-dimensional space. The crew's screams came through the comms, but they weren't screams of pain. They were screams of understanding. The numbers, Captain Walsh's voice had shifted, taking on a sing-song quality that still haunted James's nightmares. "Oh God, the numbers are alive. They're thinking. Space is thinking. It sees us. It sees everything. We are so small, so young, so loud." The recording showed Dr. Martinez fighting to maintain her composure. "Odyssey, engage emergency protocols. Get out of there." "Too late," Walsh whispered. "It's curious now. Do you understand? We're like insects to it. Noisy insects scurrying about with our quantum drives and fold spaces, making such a racket in its garden." Her voice trailed off into laughter that didn't sound human anymore. The younger James watched in horror as the Odyssey continued to transform, its hull flowing like liquid mercury into shapes that hurt to look at. The sensors burned out one by one, unable to process what they were recording. The final transmission from the ship came through all channels simultaneously, in every language the computer knew, and several it didn't. "Be quiet. Be still, or be unanade." The recording ended there. James sat in the darkness of his office, his dress uniform suddenly feeling too tight. Tomorrow, he would watch another species learn the hard lesson humanity had paid for in blood and sanity. The Cthulhu would ignore their warnings, just like the others had. He reached for his console, entering his command codes. Throughout the solar system, observation posts powered up their specialized recording equipment, technology deliberately designed to appear primitive, to avoid drawing attention from what lived in the spaces between worlds. They would document another tragedy, add it to the archive, and continue their vigilance. "Computer," he said softly, "begin recording." Personal log, Major James Sullivan, Solar Quarantine Initiative. May God forgive us for what we're about to witness. Admiral Elizabeth Cooper stood at the viewport of Outpost Hyperion, watching the void between Neptune's orbit and the asteroid belt. The massive Thalari war fleet materialized in carefully coordinated quantum jumps, their crystalline hulls catching the distant sunlight like shards of broken glass. 300 ships, Lieutenant Morgan whispered from her monitoring station. Biggest fleet we've ever had to document. Numbers don't matter here, Elizabeth replied, her voice carrying the weight of experience. Activate the recording systems. All stations, minimal power signatures only. Around the solar system, observation posts powered down their advanced systems, switching to the deliberately primitive technology that had become humanity's signature. The Thalari had mocked these systems in the council chambers, calling them proof of Earth's technological backwardness. They didn't understand that complexity attracted attention out here. The wrong kind of attention. General Zextal's transmission cut through the silence, his crystalline form dominating the simple display screen. "This is your final opportunity to withdraw your objection, Earth Command. We will pass through your asteroid belt. Any interference will be considered an act of war." Elizabeth took a slow breath, following the protocol that had been refined through decades of similar incidents. "This is Admiral Elizabeth Cooper of the Solar Quarantine Initiative. We will not interfere. We will observe. We will record. The galaxy must know what happens next." The Thalari fleet began its advance, their formation a perfect geometric pattern that spoke of millennia of space warfare experience. Their energy shields hummed with power that the human simple sensors could barely measure. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering, built by a civilization that had mastered the art of crystalline computing and quantum architecture. "They're so beautiful," Morgan said softly. "All that technology, all that advancement. That's what will doom them," Elizabeth replied, initiating the primary recording sequence. Too much complexity. Too much advancement. Too much pride. The fleet's forward elements passed the orbit of Uranus. The Thalari ships moved with perfect precision, their drives leaving ripples in spacetime that human sensors deliberately ignored. Looking too closely at such things attracted attention. Another transmission from Zextal's flagship lit up the simple comm panel. "Your primitive sensors may not be capable of detecting this, Admiral Cooper, but we are scanning your system thoroughly. There are no weapons platforms, no hidden fleets, nothing that could threaten a single ship of our fleet, let alone 300. Elizabeth activated the response channel. "General, we have shared records of 27 incidents. We have provided coordinates of debris fields. We have transmitted the recovered logs of ships larger and more advanced than yours. What lies ahead cannot be fought. It cannot be reasoned with. It cannot be survived. Please, reverse course." The crystalline general's form pulsed with colors that indicated amusement. "Your dedication to this deception is admirable, Admiral. But the Thalari Dominion has mapped space-time distortions in 1,000 systems. We have catalogued cosmic phenomena that your species cannot even perceive. There is nothing in your asteroid belt that we cannot handle." Elizabeth closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the recordings from the Ceres event. "You believe you map space-time, General. But out there, space-time maps you. It thinks, it watches, and it does not approve of the noise we make as we tear through its fabric with our quantum drives and fold spaces." "Poetic nonsense," Zextal dismissed. "Forward elements. Maintain course. Time to show humanity what real spacefaring civilization looks like." Elizabeth turned to her crew, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of intentionally outdated displays. "All posts, confirm recording status. Remember the protocol. No matter what you see, no matter what you hear, maintain position and keep recording. The galaxy must learn from their sacrifice. The Kvaleri fleet pressed forward, their crystalline ships throwing rainbow refractions across the observation post's viewport. They were an hour from the outer edge of the asteroid belt. Soon, they would learn what humanity had learned long ago, that sometimes the greatest wisdom lies in knowing when to turn back. Lieutenant Michael Torres watched his quantum sensors display impossible readings at the Ceres observation station. The massive screen showed cascading numbers that shouldn't exist in normal spacetime, a sight that made his stomach clench. He'd trained for this moment for 5 years, but nothing could truly prepare someone for watching reality begin to unravel. "First anomaly detected," he announced, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Timestamp logged. Beginning primary observation sequence. Around him, the station's systems powered down automatically, leaving only the specialized recording equipment running. The lights dimmed to emergency levels, casting long shadows across the control room. Standard protocol. Become as quiet and unremarkable as possible when the void started paying attention. Forward elements of the Kvaleri fleet are entering the outer boundary, Sarah Matthews reported from the monitoring station. Their scan beams are... Wait, that's not right. Michael moved to her station, watching as the Kvaleri's advanced sensor suites began producing contradictory results. The crystalline ship's quantum arrays were detecting spatial dimensions that shouldn't exist, measuring depths in vacuum that violated every known law of physics. A transmission cut through the eerie quiet, the voice of a Kvaleri science officer tight with confusion. Forward scout group to command. Our positioning systems are reporting spatial anomalies. Multiple ships are registering their own locations as being simultaneously in different coordinates. Through the station's viewports, Michael could see the distant glitter of the Kvaleri ships, their crystalline hulls refracting sunlight in ways that began to hurt his eyes. The fleet's perfect formation was starting to waver as their navigation systems encountered readings they couldn't process. "They're seeing themselves," Sarah whispered. "Just like the Odyssey crew, they're beginning to see what's really out there." Another transmission, this one from a different scout ship. "This is impossible. Our quantum cores are detecting thought patterns in the void. The space between asteroids. It's thinking. Command, request immediate." The transmission cut off in a burst of static. Michael activated his command channel, following the protocols drilled into every observation officer. "This is Ceres Station. Timestamp, multiple Kvaleri vessels reporting quantum consciousness detection. Beginning Phase 2 recording procedures." The main screen showed the Kvaleri fleet's formation dissolving as ship after ship reported impossible sensor readings. Their advanced AI systems, designed to process the complexities of space warfare, began experiencing cascade failures as they encountered phenomena their quantum algorithms couldn't comprehend. "Their shields," Sarah said, her voice hollow. "Look at their shields. The Kvaleri's energy barriers, previously invisible to the human station's deliberately primitive sensors, were becoming visible to the naked eye. They rippled with colors that shouldn't exist, forming patterns that made Michael's head ache when he tried to follow them. General Zextel's voice cut through the chaos, still maintaining its artificial calm. "All vessels, maintain formation. These are clearly automated defense systems of some kind. Increase power to quantum cores and prepare for..." "No," Michael breathed, recognizing the fatal mistake. "They're making themselves brighter. Louder." The nearest scout ships began to change, not through destruction or violence, but through a kind of geometric reformation that defied understanding. Their crystalline hulls folded along angles that couldn't exist in normal space, creating shapes that the human mind refused to process. "This is Scout Vessel 7, a panicked voice transmitted. We're seeing ourselves from the inside, from outside time. The void has eyes. The void has comprehension. It's solving us like equations. Command, we're being factored out off." The transmission dissolved into harmonics that made the station's windows vibrate. Michael forced himself to keep watching, keep recording. The station's simple systems documented everything while staying quiet enough to avoid drawing attention. Around them, space itself seemed to develop texture, depth, awareness. All observation posts, he transmitted, his voice mechanical with practiced control. Maintain position. Maintain records. The galaxy must know. The Kvaleri fleet's forward elements were now fully engulfed in the geometrical anomalies. Their proud ships, built with 15 millennia of technological advancement, were being unmade by something that found their very complexity offensive. And they were only at the edge of the asteroid belt. Captain Rebecca Anderson stood motionless on the bridge of the stealth vessel Nightshade, her eyes fixed on displays deliberately designed to look outdated. The Kvaleri fleet stretched before them, 300 ships of crystalline beauty now caught in something beyond comprehension. 17 minutes since first contact, Lieutenant Peter Hayes reported, his voice barely a whisper. The forward elements are there. They're being solved, Rebecca finished, watching as the proud ships of the Kvaleri Dominion underwent geometric transformations that shouldn't be possible, like complex equations being reduced to their simplest forms. The main screen showed General Zextel's flagship, its crystalline structure now refracting light in ways that made the human crew avert their eyes. The massive vessel seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, its quantum core trying desperately to maintain coherence in space that had begun to think. This is the Kvaleri command vessel Eternal Glory. Zextel's voice came through, distorted and layered with harmonics that shouldn't exist. We are being observed. Not by your sensors, by space itself. How do you survive here? Rebecca keyed her comm, knowing these would be the last words the general would hear. We learned to be quiet, to be simple, to step softly through the dark spaces between worlds. You brought quantum cores and probability drives into a region of space that finds complexity offensive. The Eternal Glory's hull began to unfold like a flower made of angles that hurt to look at. Through the fracturing quantum communications, Zextel's voice carried a note of terrible understanding. The void. It thinks. It calculates. It's reducing us to our component. No. Please. We are being simplified. All observation posts. Rebecca broadcast on the emergency channel. Mark timestamp. Phase 3 recording protocols now in effect. Switch to hardened systems only. Around the solar system, human observation posts activated their most primitive technology, simple optical cameras, and basic radiation sensors. Equipment so fundamentally uncomplicated that the entity in the void saw them as little more than background noise. The Kvaleri fleet's formation had completely dissolved. Ships hung in impossible orientations, their quantum drives trying to compensate for space that no longer obeyed traditional physics. Some vessels appeared to be inside out, their crews visible like insects in crystal, frozen in moments of realization too profound for sanity. Captain, Hayes called out, his voice shaking. The void. It's learning from them. The more advanced their countermeasures, the more it adapts. Their technology is teaching it new ways to unmake things. Rebecca watched as the mighty ships of the Kvaleri Dominion were systematically reduced to simpler and simpler forms. Not destroyed. That would be too mundane. They were being solved, like complex equations being reduced to their base components by an intelligence that found their very existence to be an irritating puzzle. How long did they rule the stars? Hayes asked softly. 15,000 years of progress, of advancement, of pride. And in less than 20 minutes. Contact from the flagship. The comm officer interrupted. It's different. Not on any known frequency. The message that came through wasn't in words. It wasn't even in any recognizable form of communication. It was pure mathematics, the language of space itself, being processed through the crystalline remnants of the Kvaleri's quantum cores. In that moment, every human observer understood what they were witnessing. The void wasn't destroying the fleet. It was correcting what it saw as mathematical errors in reality. The final transmission from General Zextel came through all frequencies at once. "We understand now. Your warning, your primitive technology. You weren't failing to advance. You were adapting. Surviving. The void. It prefers elegant solutions, simple answers. We are too complex, too noisy. We are being elegantly solved." Rebecca watched as the last of the crystalline ships underwent their final transformations. The space between Mars and Jupiter rippled like the surface of a pond returning to stillness. 300 ships, the pride of the Kvaleri Dominion, reduced to their simplest possible form. Nothing. "Log final timestamp," she ordered, her voice steady. "Prepare recovery drones. The galaxy needs to know what happened here, and why humanity chooses to whisper among the stars." Commander Thomas Wright guided his recovery vessel, the Whisper, through the now quiet space where the Kvaleri fleet had existed just hours before. The ship's systems were deliberately basic, simple thrusters, minimal electronics, and sensor equipment designed to appear as nothing more than background radiation to whatever lived in the void. "Recovery Drone Group 1, maintain current vector," he instructed, watching the small fleet of collector units drift forward. Like the Whisper, they were engineered to be unremarkable. Simple machines doing simple work, nothing that would attract attention from the deeper mathematical spaces between the asteroids. "First debris field located," reported Dr. Emily Chen, her fingers moving across displays that could have been from centuries ago. "Energy signatures are consistent with previous incidents. The void solved them all the same way." Through the reinforced viewport, Thomas could see the scattered remains. Not wreckage, not really. The pieces that remained seemed to follow mathematical patterns, as if they were the simplified terms of an equation that had once been the proud Kvaleri fleet. Some fragments still shifted between states of matter that human science couldn't classify. "Begin collection sequence," he ordered. "Standard containment protocols. Nothing advanced touches those pieces directly." The recovery drones moved forward, using mechanical claws and simple nets rather than tractor beams or energy fields. They gathered the crystalline fragments that had once been starships, each piece still humming with harmonics that made the crew's teeth ache. "Commander," Emily called out, her voice tight. "We're picking up quantum echoes from some of the larger fragments. They're still solving." Thomas moved to her station, studying the readouts. The pieces of the Kvaleri ships were still undergoing mathematical transformations, becoming simpler and simpler forms of matter. It was like watching evolution run in reverse, complexity being reduced to its most basic elements. "Containment Team Beta, adjust your approach," he commanded. "Those fragments are still active. Use the lead-lined cases, mechanical locks only, no electronic seals." A voice crackled over the comm, deliberately using old-fashioned radio waves. "Solder quarantine command to recovery team. Status report." "Recovery proceeding as planned," Thomas responded, "collecting debris for analysis. No signs of awareness in the local space. The void seems to have returned to its normal state." The recovery drones continued their work, gathering the remnants of 300 ships and over 40,000 crew members. Each piece would be studied, documented, and added to humanity's growing archive of warnings about what lived in the spaces between worlds. "Commander," Emily said softly, "I'm detecting something unusual in Section 7. It looks like it's a crystalline data core. Still intact. Still running." Thomas felt his pulse quicken. In all previous incidents, nothing this complex had survived. "Show me." The main screen displayed a basketball-sized crystal, still perfectly formed, floating among the mathematically reduced debris. As they watched, symbols and equations flickered across its surface. Not Kvaleri language, but something far more fundamental. "It's speaking the void's language," Emily whispered. "The core adapted. It simplified itself before it could be solved." Thomas studied the readings, understanding the implications. The void taught it how to be quiet, how to be simple, just like it taught us. He keyed his comm. Command, we have a Priority 1 artifact. Prepare a secure containment facility. Maximum isolation protocols. As the recovery teams worked, more ships arrived at the edges of the debris field. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy come to witness the aftermath. Their vessels kept their distance, running passive scans, finally understanding why humanity maintained such a strong quarantine zone. Prepare the official statement, Thomas instructed his communications officer. The standard response. The incident has been documented. The quarantine zone remains in effect. All observational data will be shared with the galactic community. He watched as the last of the debris was collected, each piece a testament to the price of pride in a universe that sometimes preferred silence to complexity. The void between Mars and Jupiter had returned to its usual state, empty, quiet, thinking thoughts too vast for mortal minds to comprehend. Set course for Earth, he ordered. Minimal power, simple trajectory. We've reminded the galaxy why we whisper. Let's not spoil the lesson by raising our voice now. Director Jessica Hayes stood before the secure council chamber in the Lunar Embassy, facing representatives from Earth's closest allies. The crystalline data core recovered from the Galactic fleet floated in a simple glass case behind her, its surface occasionally flickering with equations that made the alien diplomats look away. For 3 centuries, she began, humanity has carried a burden we couldn't fully share. Today, that changes. The loss of the Galactic fleet has forced our hand. You deserve to know what we guard in the spaces between Mars and Jupiter. Ambassador Nex of the Centaurian Alliance leaned forward, his feathered crest rippling with concern. The Galactic Dominion has fallen into chaos. 15,000 years of empire, undone by the loss of their fleet. We need answers. Jessica nodded to her assistant, who activated a holographic display using deliberately simplified technology. The image showed the asteroid belt, but rendered in a way that made several ambassadors gasp. The space between the asteroids was structured, organized, mathematical. What you're seeing is reality as it truly exists in that region, Jessica explained. The void between worlds isn't empty. It's alive. Conscious, and it thinks in mathematics too complex for our species to comprehend. The Proximan ambassador, her crystalline form similar to the extinct Galactic, shifted uncomfortably. How did you discover this? The Ceres event in 2185, Jessica replied. We were testing our first quantum fold drive. We made too much noise, drew too much attention. The void noticed us. She gestured to the data displays. We learned that space itself has an immune system. It recognizes complexity above certain thresholds as invasive elements and solves them, reduces them to simpler forms. Your primitive technology, Ambassador Nex whispered. Your refusal to advance beyond basic propulsion. Survival adaptation, Jessica confirmed. We learned to be quiet, to use simple machines that appear as nothing more than background noise to the mathematical awareness that lives in the void. The Galarie's quantum cores, their probability drives, they were complex equations waiting to be solved. The recovered data core pulsed with new patterns, drawing everyone's attention. The Proximan ambassador studied it intently. This survived. How? It learned what we learned, Jessica explained. In its final moments, as the void began solving the fleet's complexity, this core simplified itself, adapted, survived, just like humanity did after the Ceres event. She brought up new displays, showing the recovery operation. Every species that ignored our warnings discovered the same truth. The void thinks, it calculates, and it finds complex technology offensive, like an equation that needs to be reduced to its simplest form. The quarantine, the Centaurian representative said slowly. It's not to keep ships out. It's to keep it in. As much as such a thing can be contained, Jessica agreed. We maintain the quarantine zone because we have to. Because humanity stumbled into the role of guardians for something we barely understand. our warning beacons, our primitive technology. It's all calculated to avoid drawing attention. The crystalline core flared suddenly, projecting equations across the chamber walls. The mathematics were beautiful in their simplicity, describing space itself in terms that made fundamental forces seem like child's play. "We're sharing this now," Jessica continued, "because the galaxy needs to understand. The void between Mars and Jupiter isn't empty. It's thinking thoughts too vast for our comprehension. And sometimes, when we make too much noise with our quantum drives and probability engines, it notices us, like an immune system notices an infection." She faced the assembled ambassadors, her expression grave. "Humanity hasn't failed to advance. We've learned to walk softly through the dark places between worlds. We've adapted to survive in the shadow of something that finds complexity itself offensive. And now, after the loss of the Galactic fleet, we need your help to ensure no other species learns this lesson the hard way." The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the crystalline core, still speaking its simplified mathematics to the void. The ambassadors looked at each other, finally understanding why humanity chose to whisper among the stars. Colonel David Marshall stood before the Galactic Council, his simple uniform a stark contrast to the ornate attire of the assembled representatives. The chamber had changed since Dr. Reynolds' warning 3 months ago. The empty crystalline pods where the Galactic delegation once sat served as a silent reminder of pride's cost. "Humanity," he began, "has been called primitive, backward, afraid of advancement. Today, I'm here to explain why we choose to whisper among the stars." The main display activated, showing the recovered crystalline core from the Galactic fleet. Its surface rippled with equations that described space in ways that made advanced physics look like elementary arithmetic. "We didn't master the void between Mars and Jupiter," David continued. "We learned to survive it, to adapt, to step quietly through spaces where complexity itself is an offense against mathematical purity." The Centaurian representative, Speaker Vale, raised a feathered hand. "Your warning beacons, your quarantine protocols, the deliberate simplification of your technology. It wasn't technological regression at all, was it?" "No," David confirmed. "It was evolution. Natural selection on a cosmic scale. We learned to be quiet, or we learned to be solved." He gestured to the crystalline core. "This survived because, in its final moments, it learned what humanity learned 3 centuries ago. Sometimes survival means simplifying yourself before something else does it for you." The chamber's lights dimmed as he brought up new displays, showing the carefully designed primitive technology that humanity used to maintain their watch over the void. Simple mechanical systems, basic electronic sensors deliberately engineered to appear as background noise to whatever lived in the spaces between worlds. "We're not the masters of this force," David explained. "We're its neighbors, the family that learned to dim their lights and walk softly when something vast stirs in the dark. Our quarantine beacons don't enforce our authority. They mark the borders of our understanding." Ambassador Lyra of the Proximate Collective leaned forward. "The crystalline core. It's still calculating. Still adapting," David corrected. "Still learning to be quiet. Like we did. The void taught it how to survive by becoming simpler, by reducing its complexity to a level that doesn't attract attention from things that think in mathematics we can barely comprehend." He brought up the final display, a simple map of known space, with Earth's solar system marked not as a minor power's territory, but as something else. A warning, a reminder, a lesson written in the language of lost ships and simplified equations. "Humanity requests a new designation in the Galactic Registry," David announced. "Not as a military power or economic force, but as guardians, custodians of a region of space where reality itself thinks thoughts too vast for our comprehension." The council chamber erupted in discussion, but fell silent as the crystalline core pulsed with new patterns. The equations it displayed showed space-time itself being folded and unfolded like origami, reduced to simpler and simpler forms until only the most elegant mathematics remained. We will share what we've learned, David continued. Our warning protocols, our simplified technology, the art of walking quietly through the dark places between worlds. But more importantly, we need the galaxy's help to ensure no other species learns these lessons the hard way. Speaker Vale rose, his feathers catching the light. The K'Falari ignored your warning. They thought 15,000 years of spacefaring superiority meant they understood everything worth knowing. And now they're gone, David said softly. Solved. Simplified. Reduced to their component mathematics by something that found their very complexity offensive. Their quantum drives, their probability cores, all just complex equations waiting to be reduced to their simplest forms. He faced the council one final time. Humanity doesn't ask for authority over the void. We ask for help in protecting the galaxy from it. We've learned to survive in its shadow. Now we offer that knowledge to any who will listen. The council chamber fell silent, save for the soft hum of the crystalline core still speaking its simplified mathematics to the void. The age of quantum drives and probability engines was ending. The time of walking softly through the stars had begun. And humanity, once mocked for their primitive ways, would lead the galaxy down this quieter path.